I'm trying to get back to full screen here.
But now, Greg just joined us, so we've got our
Yeah,
chair.
I'm here. Thanks. Sorry.
Good.
Something else.
Saved just in time.
All right. Let's see. Omni Ariel, do we have a quorum?
We do have quorum.
Perfect. All
Yay!
right. We are going to call our meeting to order then. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda that you see in front of you?
I'll motion to approve the agenda. This is Bob.
Second.
All right, motion second. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All right, so we have that approved. Do we have anyone from the public here for public comment?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right, let's jump to our fourth item then. South McDares Ridge project vote. I think we all got the summaries. We've been briefed on both projects. Any other questions about that particular project? And then we can also kind of put up some of the summary and scoring here for this one. Any discussion here?
What's our average scoring, Ariel, on projects like this? Are we in the 70s typically?
Yeah, good question. So at the bottom of the screen, there's the last, I think, 4 projects that we've approved. I don't have the average, but I have the last 4. And so, yeah, most of them are in the 70s. And I would say, it just kind of depends on the project. If there are certain pieces that aren't, like an example for this property, farmland preservation, you're not going to get, that many points for that section. So I would say, 70s is an average.
And
I think Bob has a good point. Maybe we need some sense of average for projects maybe like this that lack a farm component, and then those that do. And wherever our major differentiating factors are from a scoring standpoint, I think that helps.
And I'm assuming the next one scored the same or higher. Do you have that? If you scroll down,
Yes, the next one scored lower.
Scored lower.
Is the Sand Branch property. This is the Conserving Carolina property, and then at South McDares is the Southern Appalachian property. So yeah, this one scored a 61. It looks like that similar. I don't think it's. I don't think there's view shed protection necessarily because you're not really seeing it from a road, and then also not a public access recreation points, and then not any farmland preservation points. Those are kind of the areas. And then historic and cultural resource protection. Not all properties have that, so that's another place where it's gonna lose points.
Ariel, this is Joel. Which project, they haven't got them in front of me, where they were going to need to come back to us next year for some more money?
Yes, that's the Sand Branch. That's the Conserving Carolina property. They're going to ask for easement purchase funding in the next fiscal year.
So if they don't get funding from us next year, what happens with that project? What happens with the funding we already gave them?
So our funding, the way our funding works, is it's all reimbursement. So the easement has to close before any funding can be, used from the county. So we require documentation of all the invoices as well as a copy of the easement deed that's been recorded and the survey. So should this project not move, not have gained the funding that it needs, we wouldn't be paying them anything. It all happens at the end after project's closed.
But related to that, as far as the funding, we're trying to use up what's left in this fiscal year. That's why the special meeting. We're committing the funds, should we vote on both these? And so that money may not be spent till next year, but it's already taken out of this budget and set aside from this year. Is that how?
That's correct.
Special
Yeah,
coffers?
money,
Yes.
yeah, the money exists in a special project fund.
Right.
So when the board, not LCAB, but when the Board of Commissioners approves the budget, they move, that 750 into a special project fund. And then every time one of these projects are approved by LCAB, I go to the commissioners and ask them to do a budget amendment and move that funding from the special projects fund into a special project like line item that's just associated with South McDares or Sand Branch. So it's reserved then for that.
Right. And then if they don't eventually close, that money comes back into
Yes.
the coffers.
We're able to consolidate those funds. Should the project ever back out or it doesn't close, we can consolidate those funds and then use them for another project in the future.
That was a good question, Joel. I never thought about that.
But Ariel, if we do not allocate, we do not fully recommend use of our allocation, then that money does not technically roll over. It has to be associated with a project.
So it's preferred to be associated with the project. It will technically still roll over and just be in this general special project fund that's called future conservation easements. It's definitely preferred, I believe, from budget and the commissioners that we can show that we're using the entire fiscal year budget so that we can justify next year's allocation of the same funding. But yes, we don't lose it. It'll still roll over. That's a fund that can roll.
Okay. Well, I think
And did I hear you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, this is Sarah. Did I hear you say in our last meeting, Ariel, that we have the funds to cover both projects?
Yes.
And is there how much more is there beyond these two in the budget?
So I can share out but I have a budget amendment request for board action that has all the specifics on it that I can share with the board. But to give you a general idea, at the beginning of fiscal year 23, we had an amount of funding that had rolled over from previous years. So at this point, with the allocation of these two projects, we will have actually allocated over the 750 for this fiscal year because there was an extra buffer coming from a previous fiscal year, if that makes sense. So there won't technically be any of fiscal year 23 funds left, but there is still, I think, maybe 30,000 or so in that future conservation easement fund. But I'll send you that request for board action so you can get the specifics.
But I think essentially approval of these two projects would largely exhaust our funding.
Absolutely.
Let's maybe talk about South McDares Ridge a little bit more, probably vote on that. And then I think the sand project probably deserves a little more discussion. Other comments on the South McDares Ridge? You guys ready to vote?
I think so.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Go ahead. Is there somebody else?
No, I was just saying yes, ready to vote.
All right. Well, Bob, we'll put you on the spot then to say that you are making this motion for the approval of the project as presented with the funding request.
I'm fine to make the motion. I do have discussion on the next project and I'd like to make the motion on that one, but I will make it on this one if it just doesn't look funny.
It does not, Bob.
Okay.
We'll
I've made a
take that
motion.
as a motion. Do we have a second?
Second,
All right, Joel, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of recommending this project for funding to the commissioners, please say aye and raise your hand.
uh,
Aye.
All right, perfect. The motion carries. So we have that one done. And if we scroll down to the next project for just a minute. Bob, you want to have a minute for discussion here?
Sure. I was the one person that was able to visit the site with Tom Fonslow and Kyle, who sort of owns the land, I guess, manages it, and has for many years. I just was, when I scored it, it scored lower than I would have liked to have scored because of the things we discussed a little earlier on. And I feel like it was not a good, I don't know, I feel like it biased it in a way that I didn't agree with. I visited the site and this is a beautiful piece of property. It looks like so many of the pieces that we have voted on with high scores and protected, it just doesn't happen to have a couple of the cultural things. And I felt like Tom, who I've known for a number of years, I feel like he didn't, unless I misunderstood the application versus the description of the property, I felt like he didn't really push the things that he could have pushed that were in the description in as strong a manner as, say, we've seen other properties pushed, many through Highlands Conservancy and a couple through Conserving Carolina. But it did have an agricultural component to it currently. What I didn't understand was whether that would continue. But anyway, that, and then it also had beautiful, typical montane oak forests and acidic cove forests. I heard a number of diverse bird species that live in those habitats that you don't always hear on the same hike. I was really impressed with that. I also noticed that this property, it reminds me of like one of the first properties in Sandy Mush, where once that got protected, it helped influence others, because there's a lot of beautiful land and undisturbed forest around this place. And I'd love to see the same kind of growth of other conservation easements around it. And as Tom probably, I missed the meeting because I couldn't get on, I was driving and I just couldn't get connected for some reason that day. But I imagine Tom did describe that they are going to be proposing additional conservation easements for the same owners adjacent to this land, and that all could, in my mind, inspire other landowners to do likewise in the future. So for all of those reasons, oh, and the forest floor species, the herbs, there were very many rich soil areas. I noticed beautiful trilliums and jack-in-the-pulpits and species like that occur in lots of our forests, but not in many other ones. So I am very, I just, when I walked away from this property, I just said, there's no doubt about how I'm voting. And then when I scored it, I was sort of disappointed that it was lacked some of the other areas, the recreation and all, but I just want you all to know this is a beautiful piece of property. So that's my input.
Thanks, Bob.
That's right. Yeah, I covered everything. I thought I forgot something, but I think I covered it all.
I think it's a good point that, just because a project scores a certain number doesn't mean, doesn't necessarily mean it's a yay or a nay.
Yeah.
That's the point of having an advisory board, and having these site visits too. And might not always see. I guess, yeah, evaluations might not always prove that that's the right project, but site visits really help. So.
Yeah, Ariel, this is Joel. I think I brought this up once before. I mean, I like the scoring sheet, but having especially farmland preservation, if it's not farmland, makes the scoring sheet very biased. I mean, maybe there should be 2 different scoring sheets where if there is no farm, I could pretty much see the rest of the stuff staying in there. But, I know if there's no farmland preservation, it's almost like, how do you give it any points?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We're definitely looking in on creating, a with farmland and a without farmland version. So we'll keep plugging away at that.
Other comments about this project? And again, all of these projects are not perfect. They all have something that, we might not view as favorably as we did Lake Eden or something, just sheer size or particular cultural importance or something else. So I don't want to take away from it because it did score low, because that's our subjective judgment. But I also think it's a valid point for us to be able to legitimately defend our scoring if we're going to have a metric on it. So in this case, differences between these 2 projects are scenic viewshed, historic and cultural resources, and the leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 disparate kind of scoring between these 2 projects. I think that Bob gave us some very good information in a very positive way about this sand project, and the fact that this might encourage another donation or easement purchase in the future. And I do think that Tom's more reserved than some of our other conservationists. So we don't want to hold that against him, that he's not super excited and showing that on every project. Other comments here?
Well, I would like to say I appreciate Bob Gales going out there. Wish I could have made this visit, but it does stress the importance of, us attending and actually visiting the properties. And related to Joel's point, we still scored at 21 points for farmland preservation. And I think that's because I think that averages like 3.5 points per person who scored it. And so other people like me didn't want to drag down the whole score, so gave it some points for farmland preservation, although it didn't really maybe apply. But so I think that may have happened here too with others, that you don't want to, that was my thought. I didn't want to drag it all the way down. So I gave it something for farmland preservation and
Right.
historic cultural too.
I know we're about to lose Nancy. I don't want to cut off discussion, but if we are in a position to vote, I think I'd rather have Nancy on just in case if we're ready to do that. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve this project.
All right, you get
I'll
Bob
second.
off the hook. Bob will second. That's great. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to recommend this to the commissioners, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the motion passes. Any other discussion here? I did think the Sand Branch was a good project, but probably not at the top of what we've been seeing historically. And we're gonna have more of that. You know, the low hanging fruit, in some cases, we have already gotten. And so these projects are gonna have a different value add potentially. So maybe our standard has to adjust to available inventory or resources as well. So I think that's good. I think these two projects together were good for us as a group to see that and start recognizing some of these differences. Other questions or comments? All right. Well, we wanted to make this a fairly quick meeting, so we will. Is there anything else? If
One
not, go ahead,
meeting.
Joel.
Our next meeting will be next month.
Yes, our next meeting will still be, let's see, June 21st. The third Wednesday of June. Yep.
Okay, and I will then be on the committee as a volunteer citizen, not as a Mountain True employee then, but I've committed to the 3-year term, so I will be here. And by the way, if anybody happens to want to, Mountain True is having a celebration for me at the Wedge on Foundy Street on June 13th at 4:30 to 6:30. So if anybody wants to stop by for a beer and have some fun, I don't know what they're doing for me, but anyway, it ought to be fun. You're all invited, all partner organizations I've ever worked with.
Well deserved, Bob. You've been a stalwart there and for us for a long time.
Thank
All
you.
There
Everybody
ain't
have a good
nothing
day.
else. Everybody good? Ariel, good luck.
I'll hopefully see you guys next month.
All right, thanks. Let us know everything's okay, please.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good
Bye, everyone.
afternoon. We'll
Thanks,
stand
everybody.
adjourned.
Good to see you.